Hey there, good morning Lincoln gardeners. I'm going to show you guys how to plant a cover crop in this bed. So this is a bed where we had planted vegetables last year. There's a little bit of kale that grew back from our winter garden last year, as well as this is a pepper plant that was growing here during the summertime. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take all these plants out of here and we're going to plant a cover crop here. And what a cover crop does is a cover crop is a special kind of plant that we don't eat, but which helps us to improve the soil to make it stronger and more healthy. So I'm going to explain to you how to plant a cover crop in this bed, and I hope you have fun doing it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we need to get rid of all this vegetation. You're probably thinking, what kind of a tool do we need? Well, what we don't need is we don't need something like this. That's likely to cause a problem if we poke it into the side of our vegetable bed. So you don't need something like this, so let's put that aside. You're going to need just a pruner like this to start off with. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of this old crop residue, or these old plants, out of the bed. And we're going to set them aside in a bucket. Okay, so I got a bucket here. I'm going to put all this stuff that I'm cutting aside in that bucket. Okay, so just cutting all this old kale off right at the roots. Some of it's kind of tough, so you might need to have a teacher with strong hands or a volunteer to help with that. Okay, so I've just about got all the kale out of here. There we go. Now, one really good question is, what should you do with all this? Well, because the kale is actually still pretty edible, if you want, you could take off the old leaves that look kind of yucky and take these nice central leaves like this, maybe cut that off like that. You could take this home and eat it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take up our irrigation bucket. So you might remember there's these little pins that hold down our irrigation system. There should be about 3 of them per bucket. So I took these out. We want to keep these and set these aside so we don't lose them. And now our bucket system, our bucket irrigation system, can lift out. Put it aside. All right. Now that our bed is kind of got all this residue out of it, we put it in our bucket. Now, some people might say, let's put this in the compost. That could work, but I actually kind of like putting it back on the soil surface. That's just kind of my preference, because it can actually help to protect the soil and keep it make the rainwater move into it a little better. Now the next thing I want you to do is, if you see any weeds, you could use a little fork thing like this, pull out some of these weeds. Okay, I'm just trying to scratch up a little bit so that I can get rid of some little seedlings of, if there's little weeds in there. You don't need to dig real deep, just kind of scratch the surface. Try to make it level too. You want to have your bed kind of leveled off, the soil in there. Now in the process of this, I really don't want you to go down much more than about that deep, because it's really not necessary. Okay? And if you hit a little bit of a stump from one of the old plants, like an old kale plant, don't worry about that. All right, this is ready to plant. To plant this, what I like to do is I'm going to put this pruner right here in the middle, because I'm going to make 3 lines on this side and then 3 more lines on this side where we're going to plant the seed. I'm just going to use this little trowel to make the lines. Just kind of scrape across like that. Let me open that up a little bit. That's where our seed's going to go. Another one over here. Okay. I'm going down about that deep, maybe an inch or 2 or 2 inches. Another one over here. Okay. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3 lines on this side. Now we're going to do 1, 2, 3 lines on the other side of our little pruner. So the seed that we're going to plant, there's 2 kinds. We're going to put a special bacteria onto this seed that's going to help the seed to be able to take nitrogen out of the air and put it into the soil. It's a bacteria that doesn't hurt you, but the plant really needs it. So what I would suggest you do is you need about 2 to 3 tablespoons of this seed, and this seed is called Vetch. Vetch. So we'll put 2 to 3 tablespoons of this, let's say 3 tablespoons, in a new bag. Okay. And then you're going to take a little bit of water, maybe half a tablespoon of water, not very much. Don't put too much, just put a little less. Then we're going to close up our bag, shake it around. So what this is doing, this is making the seed all a little bit wet so that we can get this special bacteria to stick onto it. Okay, so now I'm going to take probably like half a teaspoon of this bacteria, put it in there, seal up the bag again, give it a good shake. And now what's happened is all the bacteria is coating the seed. See, now remember, this bacteria is not bacteria that will hurt you. It's bacteria that's good bacteria. Now, one thing you could do, which I think I would suggest, is soak the seed, this vetch seed, your 3 tablespoons of that, overnight. Okay, you could soak that overnight in a container like this so that the seed swells up. And then the next day, do exactly like what I said. Take you get rid of all the water, pour the water off, and the seed will still be kind of moist, but it'll be a little bigger than this. And then put the bacteria, this inoculant, onto that soaked seed. And the reason I'm telling you to soak it like that in advance is that it'll germinate faster because it'll already be nice and wet and have already started the germination process. I didn't do it today because I didn't have time to do that. I forgot about it last night, but it'll make your cover crop grow up faster. We're going to take our seed that's got that bacteria all around it, and we're going to plant it into these furrows. You want to spread that seed evenly throughout all these different furrows. So start off in one of those little furrow areas, those little lines, and put about a seed every inch or so. And go to the next one and do it over there too. So I'm not too worried about making it all perfectly spaced, just so there's seed in each of these furrows, and I'm not putting it all down at once. I'm going back and forth over these different furrows, these different lines, quite a few times. That way we make sure that we don't miss any spots. Vetch is a legume. It's like a bean. And many years ago, before farmers had chemical fertilizers, they would use beans to make their soil better. So we're kind of using a method of improving our soil and making it better that's been used for thousands and thousands of years. It's pretty cool. The next step is to plant this other one. Now this other seed, this is called rye. And you don't need very much rye seed. I really want you to only plant about half a teaspoon of rye, not more than that, because rye is very aggressive and it's a grass. We only want a little bit of it in here. What I'm suggesting you do is put about maybe 5 to 10 seeds in each line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I put 9 there. If we put too much of this seed, then our vetch won't grow very well. Okay, so now we've got our seed all in the ground, and the next thing you do is you just cover it over, just real with a little bit of soil. Okay, cover it over with little soil like that. I can give it a slight pat, not too hard, just very slightly, kind of gently. Okay, so everything's planted. Now the next step is you're going to take a bunch of this stuff and cut it up and stick it back on the top of even some old leaves. Break those up, small pieces, rip them up real small if you can, and spread that on the soil surface. You don't want it real thick, but what this is going to do is this is going to help us to, it'll kind of be like a little bit of a blanket over the soil. As the cover crop starts to grow, it's going to grow up through all this stuff, and then this will all decompose and all this stuff will become soil. So I don't want it to be very thick. You still want to be able to see the soil surface a little bit. This long stemmy stuff is probably the best stuff to put on the top of the soil. The leaves, we've got to be a little careful that we don't put too many leaves in there. Now if you do have too much old stems and leaves like this, we're going to be able to take that and use that in some of the other beds where we're going to plant vegetables. Okay, so some of the beds this year are going to get planted with a cover crop, and other ones are going to get planted with vegetables during the winter. So we don't want to cover it too much because we want the seeds that are underneath there to still be able to come up through all this small amount of residue. But what's good about having a little bit of residue on the soil surface is that when the rains come, this kind of protects the soil surface and doesn't let it get all hard and crusted over. Because sometimes if the soil surface is too crusted over, the water can't go in very well. And that's why we like to have some residue on the surface. This stuff here, all these old pieces of leaves, we call this residue. So what I would probably suggest is that you get make sure that you've got maybe just about a ½ inch or so of stuff kind of covering the soil here and there, not completely covering it. The cover crop will come up through this because a lot of this stuff is just going to rot and dry anyway and decompose. So when you water, you want to be really putting the water on kind of slowly. What I like to do is I like to go from one side to the other. This can is not the greatest, but it'll be okay for today. Okay, so you might need somebody with kind of long arms that can do this, a teacher or volunteer. And one really nice thing you might notice when you put water on is that because we have leaves and stuff and some old stems from our other plants on the soil surface, it actually allows the water to soak in better and not just run down to one side of the bed. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's how you plant a cover crop. It's pretty easy. Have fun with it. And then when you come back next year, we'll talk about what to do with that as it grows up and makes the soil more healthy. Take care.